Hey, Hitesh, welcome to episode 1. How you feeling today, bud?
I am doing great. Looking forward to it. Another one. I can't believe we made it this far.
Yeah, yeah. This is definitely going to be a little different today. You ready to jump in this with a guest or knock all the jitters out with episode 0?
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we definitely picked the layup for the first episode here, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But really looking forward to it. But before we get into the first episode, wanted to take a second and just kind of recap some of episode 0.
Sure, let's go.
It was released about a week ago, I guess, right? More or less.
Yeah, it's been about a week.
If you missed it, first of all, check it out on LinkedIn or YouTube. It's at Dishin with DR. Look forward to having more people provide feedback and give us their thoughts on the first, or the episode 0, as we called it. I mean, Hitesh, you have any feedback?
I had a good time. It was the first time I had done a podcast of any kind, so it was definitely a good experience, and I got to hang out and chit chat with you.
Well, absolutely. And for those of you who checked us out already, thanks. We really appreciate it. Lot of people liked the YouTube post or the LinkedIn post, and we had some comments come back on on my personal LinkedIn page. Hitesh, I don't know if you've received any on yours, and we really appreciate the positive nature of the likes and the feedback. We did get some constructive feedback on the show in general. I don't know, Hitesh, I was going to share some ideas, some thoughts with you, and see how we can maybe make this a little bit better going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't really see any feedback as far as constructive criticism or anything like that come through yet, but looking forward to seeing some of that.
All right, perfect. Well, the first thing I received feedback on was it came directly to me, and it said, don't look at the computer monitor. So I watched the episode 0 again, and I, in fact, am looking at the computer monitor. So I wanted to take a second and just explain that I'm 49 years old, and I don't remember the shit I wrote down an hour ago as well as I used to. So I'm going to continue to look at the computer monitor.
I have I have 3 computer monitors in front of me, so I think being remote, I guess that's the advantage.
Perfect. The second piece that I got was that the lighting was bright in the studio, a little washed out. They said that I looked a little washed out. So I don't know, Marvin, can we dim the lights? Maybe set a little mood, maybe put on side 1 of Led Zeppelin 4, channel a little Mike Damone up in here, kind of set the tone. Appreciate that, buddy. By the way, Marvin's still here today, making all this happen, make all this go down. So there you go. The mood's a little bit better here in the studio. So thanks for that. And then the last bit of feedback I got may have come from someone close to both Hitesh and I. And the feedback simply said, Hitesh looks short. My response to that feedback was, have you met David Bledsoe? Because everything's in perspective.
There you go. There you go.
So I don't know, Hitesh, you said you didn't get any feedback. Do you have any personal feedback that you want to share? Just things that, you thought went well or people should pay special attention to?
No, I think as we continue forward with the guests that we have and the list of guests that we have, I think it's going to continue to hopefully add value for people and provide a little bit of entertainment. I mean, that's really what we're here for, right? So
that's exactly what we're here for. The whole idea behind this is bring people together, have a good time, share some ideas on the industry, make people laugh. Hopefully, people enjoy the show and we're able to bring on, more guests. So, well, hey, listen, if you can follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn, better yet, if you want to email us at podcast@dishinwithdr.com. You can set up some time to come visit us, get your own episode, get your chance to poke fun at Hitesh. We appreciate the feedback, followers, and future guests. It's an important part of the show. And like I said, it's all about having fun. So no reason to be concerned or nervous about it being part of it. So for this show, once again, this show is, we're going to talk about our sponsors for just a second. And this episode is once again brought to you by RK Squared. Flexible, transparent, on time, under budget, a fresh new approach to in-building. RK Squared is designed to redefine. So Hitesh, I think we're ready to start this conversation.
All right. Sounds good.
Hey, so guest number 1, episode number 1, could not think of a better person than to invite than Ken Sandfeld from Solid. Ken, welcome to Dishing with DR episode 1.
I am so excited to be episode number 1.
Hitesh and I came up with a fun new way to try to keep connected with people, have a little bit of fun, keep the social aspect of what we do on a daily basis open. Again, focus on fun. Hitesh, you still with us, bud?
I am. Looking forward to this. It's been a while since we actually caught up with Ken. So, and the fact that the three of us are on a video call, that I don't think that's ever happened. So
The fact that that actually works right now, right? I mean, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so, all kidding aside, it really is, what, a week removed from this not working. I mean, Ken, things in Texas got a little touch and go, right? Power outages, rolling blackouts, bad ice. Everything all right down there? Getting back to normal?
Everything's fine. People are still, putting things back together. And, no doubt, the politicians and everyone else and the people are going to, they're going to figure out what went wrong, because that kind of suffering due to power outages shouldn't happen in 2021. So maybe in 2020, but not 21.
Well, it's good to hear, Ken, that things are getting back to normal. I know that, there's a lot to be done just because power's back on and stuff. There's still a lot of people that need to, the houses got damaged and things like that. Hopefully everyone is safe now. And, like I said, the slow progress of getting back to normal will begin.
Yeah. No, it's tough stuff. I know in the Northeast, you guys are kind of used to, the power lines freezing and falling down, and then you have to deal with the outage. There was no power lines frozen here, right? So this was just the power turned off. They had to turn it off, right? So this wasn't due to things breaking. So yeah, it's pretty tough on folks. We're not used to things freezing here. This is Texas. Our walls are only about that thin, so that thick. So we can't handle frostbite here.
Thin walls have pros and cons. Obviously, cold weather, pipes freeze. But when it comes to RF, we all know that it penetrates much better on your thin walls down in Texas. So
there we go.
That's a good way to kick this thing off.
Yeah, but cell sites require power too there, Dennis. And let me tell you, when the power goes off, those batteries only last so long. So that actually became an issue as well. So, that's just another victim of no electricity.
So Hitesh, I'm going to kick this off, and I think that you'll find humor in this. So before I read this, Lakshman comes to mind. So I'm going to see how many people like Lakshman can catch the subtlety of what I'm about to read, and see if they can figure it out. So this was given to me in writing, so I'm going to read it the way it's written, and we'll see who can pick this up here. So, first of all, I want to introduce Ken formally, right? So Ken has worked in the wireless industry for 25 years, about 16 years in the DAS space, about 11 years with Solid. His passions are, solving connectivity challenges in the carrier space and in the enterprise space. He loves RF amplifiers, loves all things RF related. I can personally attest to the fact that, he gets into the weeds and gets elbow deep on, the technology side, but also the application side, really gets into, the love for his job is crystal clear and very evident. Ken isn't an engineer, so the technology side is self-taught and, does a great job of all that. But he does own, a 3D printer, a soldering iron, and he did sleep at a Holiday Inn last night. So, he acts like an engineer to the best of his ability. His car does need to be plugged in. So, Ken, sounds like for the last 2 weeks, you might not have been doing a lot of driving. But, we want to welcome you and say hello.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here, guys. This is, obviously, great time to talk about our industry and catch up on some good old times as well, and really reflect on our space and what's going on in the marketplace right now. Because I tell you, it's both a tough time and a great time to be in this kind of business right now. Because we've always said, as long as I've known you two, I've always said, physics drives our industry, even though we're not physics majors. Getting signal of any type, any protocol, any band into your building, into wherever you are, people want it. That drives our business forward, and we need to help make that happen for folks. So it's the universal fact, right, for us.
last week on episode 0, Ken, we kind of gave you a pre-introduction. We made you a little famous, may have built you up a little bit. We gave you credit for what we, Hitesh and I, consider to be the greatest sales job in the history of Solid. Hitesh, you want to reflect on what that sales job is?
Absolutely. So 10, almost 11 years ago today, when we were talking, Ken, and you were giving me an idea of what Solid was and who Solid was and all of that, I came running back to you and I said, that sounds really interesting. Can I work for Solid? Yeah, absolutely. We walked through what that looked like. You told me that you had this huge funnel. We had a warehouse, we had people, I showed up. It was a $5 million funnel, which was great. And then no people. It was just me.
Yeah.
That was a sales job right there. Then I think a few months later, Dennis came on board. Dennis, how did that work out?
So the interesting thing, I was thinking about, getting ready to do this today and kind of bring the three of us together. And I remember 10 years ago when we first got together, Hitesh, the very first week I met you in person, Ken brought us out to Livermore, California at the time. And our very first meeting, we're in this meeting room in Livermore, some stuff up on the board, and we're focusing on different ideas, concepts, positioning of the product. And out of nowhere, Ken jumps up, throws a notepad on the floor and steps on it. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And Ken is like, that's, I don't know, some type of spider, and it doesn't belong in this room. And he crushed the spider right on the set, right there. He crushed the spider, and he was like, we got to be careful and watch out for those. That's my very first memory of the three of us getting together in this type of environment.
So guys, had I told you, we had a folding table, a chair, and a soldering iron, I just bought a DeWalt screw gun as our warehouse. All right, would it have changed anything? Or if the $5 million spreadsheet funnel had been real, would it have changed anything?
We would have closed 5 million that year. That would have helped.
It might have changed. It might have changed our quota the following year. That's about it. But yeah, hey, listen, Ken, we talked about this last time as well. So it started off with that, $5 million and all that fun banter back and forth. But realistically, I mean, we got there, hit the ground running, closed some really good projects in the first year, more projects in the second year, and it was off to the races. So, I think that I mentioned last week the three of us would not be here today had it not been for the opportunity and the $5 million funnel. So to me, it was worth $5 million.
Absolutely. And the bug.
And the poor, you called it a brown recluse. You called it some kind
of a brown recluse.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll never forget that. I was like, what?
No joke.
And Dennis, your memory was a lot better then. That wasn't even on your monitor.
That's right. So, here we are today, Ken, 10 years later, all the good memories, but, the industry has also changed quite a bit. And we covered some of that in episode 0, right? Hitesh and I went back 10 years and we talked about kind of LTE and 700 megahertz and kind of the more clear messaging around what was LTE, what was needed to get it done, what band it was going to operate in, and so on and so forth. So, we talked about LTE and now 5G and, where we came from and how we got here. So, Ken, today we're going to talk, what we'd like to talk to you a little bit about is, what's going on in the market today? What's the new buzz around 5G from Solid's perspective? And how do you see at a high level, just to begin, the carriers and how they're playing into all of this?
Absolutely, Dennis. Well, here's the thing, guys, the carriers are just now, getting to 5G inside, right? They've been very busy getting 5G deployed outside, and even that is got a long way to go, right? So now slowly it's time to figure out how to make 5G work inside, and why to make 5G work inside, right? So there's lots of reasons why, and so I think that's really the big thing, and obviously that ties into a lot of things. The actual new, NR radio standards, as well as new frequency bands that we, as this last week, the C-band auctions were completed. So that was huge news, right? We've had a year plus of CBRS, things like that. Those things are all driving the narrative of how, these networks are going to look in the future. And, there's a lot going on. I mean, we can break each one of those down and kind of address them and see how they're going to impact, our space, and all of them do. I mean, spectrum drives everything. You guys know that, right? And I think we should talk a little bit about the spectrums as well. But all those things are going to increase the requirements for both macro networks. They always do. But for in-building, it's even going to be a bigger deal. I mean, here's the thing, guys. Dennis, every system you installed over the years, even the stuff at Sprint, every system I installed, every system Hitesh installed, every system we've ever been involved with, either has to be upgraded, will be upgraded, or in the next few years will be upgraded, hands down.
So Ken, you brought up something that's interesting to me, and we touched on it last week. We didn't really, but so you talked about a lot of the NR, the legacy bands. You mentioned C-band, and we'll get into that in a minute. And even CBRS, we'll get into that in a minute. They kind of fall into the category of, a more traditional type of, wireless band. Millimeter wave, kind of a curveball, right? As it relates to how you deploy it, even in building, how you deploy it. You want to talk a little bit about some of the unique qualities of millimeter wave and what you as an OEM have to consider when it comes to deploying this network?
Sure. Well, I mean, millimeter wave affords you a very large, pipe to be able to, anywhere from 800 to 1600 megahertz of spectrum to be able to drive that capacity to the user. So, I mean, it's a huge opportunity to, develop both public and private applications to run on that spectrum. A lot of people say, well, yeah, but what are the magic applications? I don't know, but they're going to do it. They're going to figure it out. When you have that much spectrum and that much potential speed and latency improvements with 5G NR, the possibilities are amazing. The things, though, that drive into the complexities of that, though, however, are the issues of propagation for that frequency. The frequency does not go through objects, right? It can't go through a wall. It can't, you can't even, it's laser beams basically, right? And don't go there with the sharks and we can go off with the sharks with laser beam thing, right? That's a whole separate discussion there.
We need Saeed for that conversation.
Yes, we need Saeed Anwar. But the reality is, you're talking about a very specific area. But here's the difference between, deploying an omni or a directional antenna for the sub 6 gigahertz band and millimeter. You now have an active antenna array that has about a 70-degree beam pattern that can be adjusted. So you can actually track, and adjust to the users that are in view, right? So you have a lot of smart capabilities in the device than you would normally have just with a DAS antenna. So a little bit more intelligent. I like to call them indoors. It's more of a hotspot situation, right? You're at the airport gate, and in your little airport gate, there's that square that you sit in front of the gate. That area would be a potential millimeter wave hotspot. The aisle in between and the common areas, maybe not so much, right? So what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. If I knew that I could walk into a hotspot area and it switches, great. Then I know I got to go to those areas, right? Creating 100% edge-to-edge coverage is much more challenging and probably won't be a reality for quite some time, even for an in-building application.
So Ken, going back to, and Hitesh, keep me technically correct here. So going back to your comment about some of those networks we sold back in the day needing to be potentially upgraded. In fact, this, in addition to upgrading some of the legacy equipment to meet faster or 5G spec, you're almost talking about a parallel network in addition to your common bands. Hitesh, is that right?
Yeah, that seems that's a correct statement. I believe that's what that's what the operators are working towards as well. So, but Ken, from an OEM perspective, what are you seeing as far as requests from the operators and as far as what they're looking to launch out into the market on the in-building side? Is it truly just that hotspot at a gate, or are they doing it more? Are they driving towards the edge-to-edge coverage? What are they
Sure.
looking for?
Sure. Well, they would of course like to have edge to edge everywhere. That's kind of the
We're
thing.
not talking about the engineers here. We're talking about the financial guys that actually make the decisions.
Yes.
So
Oh, you mean you got to pay for this? So you got to look at what's in their toolkit, guys. You got G-Node Bs, basically full size base stations, sectorized base stations for millimeter wave, and you can deploy those. Then you've got small cells, right? You've seen there's various vendors that are producing small cells, for millimeter wave, not quite as powerful as a G-Node B. And then the third tool that we'll have is, and by the way, I believe 2020 is the year that BDAs are no longer a four-letter word. BDAs will make a comeback, and they'll be millimeter wave BDAs, and they will have both an indoor and an outdoor play. And so those are the three tools that operators and enterprise and third-party owners will use to figure out how to provide that, let's just call it 1600 megahertz of bandwidth to the in-building users, right? So whichever one of those works depends on the dynamics of the project. How much fiber to the building is available, how high value is it, who's going to pay for things, all those kind of things. But at a minimum, a repeater solution would get some of that 1600 megahertz outside to the inside. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, instead of dedicating one type of solution, approach across different product set offers the most flexibility for the enterprise, most flexibility for the carrier. I think it suits the customer's need better, and it also suits the carrier's need better. So makes complete sense. So look, we talked a little bit about millimeter wave. What's up with C-band? How does that shake up the market? Verizon just spent $45 billion. I think AT&T spent $23 billion.
No. 82 billion.
For who?
The combined total.
Yeah, well, the combined total. Yeah.
So Verizon spent $45 billion. AT&T spent $23 billion. T-Mobile spent $9 billion. A bunch of other people. But here's another question, subset question, Ken, that maybe you can help us understand. Dish only spent $3 million on a very isolated part of the C-band network out in the West. So, why the big difference? Who else got spectrum? What's your take on the plan?
Well, still learning, how everyone's going to utilize it. I believe, Verizon obviously, needed the spectrum, right? Because they needed a mid-band offering. And, by garnering that many blocks of C-band, they're going to have a pretty comprehensive network, right? And they've now got enough spectrum to be able to compete, stronger. T-Mobile actually bought more than I thought they were going to buy. But I think they're going to use it to bolster their different offerings. You got to remember, I think the play is pretty obvious, right? For the top tier, that they needed that to be able to offer the new services out in the market for 5G. And C-band is very deployable. I mean, it's great spectrum, but the reality is T-Mobile still has more total spectrum at this point, if you look at their stack up.
Any ideas on Dish and kind of their play in the C-band?
Well, I still have to look at some of the results of what they won. I haven't looked at all the details yet. There's different ways they'll be able to utilize that in some key markets. I'm not really sure how they're going to use that, whether it's truly for mobile, mobile everywhere, or if they're going to use some of that for their backhaul. But at this point, it's really unclear exactly how they're going to leverage that in those markets. I mean, if you look at it, goes from billions to millions pretty quick, right? There's like the top guys, and then it goes down to millions.
Well,
so
Verizon is double of what anybody is, right? I mean, they're double the next. AT&T's more than double the next. So it's really interesting. Yeah. So I think Dennis mentioned it, but Dish spent 3 million with an M
Yeah.
in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I believe, for a block, and that's it. So it's really I mean, that was the biggest surprise to me. I think I think we all knew that Verizon was going to spend what they were going to spend, but I was expecting Dish to make a big play there. Maybe they're waiting on phase 2. I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
I have not. I have not. But think about it, guys. I mean, Dish has enough spectrum for that. They got to deploy the first set of spectrum first. So they're spending their money right now to deploy the network they have and the spectrum that they have. So
absolutely. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, their challenge right now is not getting more, it's getting it out, right? Getting it deployed, getting people on the network. So I guess
look at remember, guys, Dish is deploying 5G from the get-go. There's no transition. It's just a 5G network, period, right?
Absolutely. So, we just talked about 2 different bands, right? So massive investment in C-band. Does that change in any way, shape, or form the play for millimeter wave? Does it impact it directly, or do they coexist?
It could impact things, guys, because think about it. You now have this very coveted, mid-band spectrum in the 3 gigahertz, 3 to 4 gigahertz range, as opposed to millimeter wave, which is very expensive to deploy. It might change the strategy slightly. Instead of a full mobile coverage, maybe it is more hotspot oriented. Maybe it's used for specific, in-building applications. I mean, we don't really know, right? We are still believing that millimeter is going to be deployed quite, from a blanket coverage perspective, but we also know that it's fairly focused, for fixed wireless access. So it may be more specifically used than the deployment. But when you spend that kind of money on that mid-band, highly coveted spectrum, you got to deploy that. You got to get that deployed and fast. So I think millimeter wave offers a differentiation, right? You can do things with 1600 megahertz. You just can't do with a couple hundred megahertz, right? And it's very a comprehensive spectrum. It's just harder to work with, right? So, but when it works, I mean, obviously Solid has been developing solutions out there. We've been trialing now for quite some time. And I've been on some of these trials. And let me tell you, when you look at your handset and you're getting 1.2 gigs to your handset, your jaw drops, guys. I mean, you're literally like, I love this business. I mean, 1.2 gigs. I mean, whoever thought, right?
So let's talk about that for a second. So we talked about a couple different bands today, a couple different technologies, whatever, and complementary, potentially at some point, maybe competitive bands. We talked about the legacy bands, millimeter wave, C-band being newer bands, all this. What does that do to the customer landscape? Like if I'm a transportation, healthcare, hospitality, whatever, what can I expect at the end? Not the infrastructure, as a user. What does it look like for me?
Well, do you guys remember when LTE deployed back in 2008? Right? When
LTE to life.
All right. So, matter of fact, my first LTE device was a Sprint device at the time. You authorized it back then, Dennis, and I had the hardest time finding places to connect. But when I did, it was awesome, right? I was like, oh man, if I go to that Starbucks and I stand on one leg, this little dongle is going to work, right? So I'm going to sit in that corner and it work, right? And I think people are going to be searching for it. They're going to gravitate towards it. They're going to they realize now that it takes time and it won't be everywhere instantly. And they're going to be looking for it. People are already looking for it. And then they're going to feel that experience of having that low latency, instantaneous, be able to push buttons and things happen instantaneously, which is latency. And they're going to feel that speed of delivery and they're just going to crave it. And so I think that's kind of how it's going to go in the beginning, right? And so what I think people are going to start experiencing is they're going to experience that. I really think deploying it in indoor experience is actually easier, right? Deploying millimeter wave in a venue or in certain places in some ways can be easier because you've got a fixed audience, sometimes even sitting in their seats. You can point stuff at them and they're kind of non-mobile, right? So it's almost easier. But once they experience it, I think there won't be much going back. I think we'll continue to build. All the talk about the applications, I personally am a believer that the applications will come. We built the LTE network thinking, oh, well, what are the applications? Although we did know they were video. We knew we wanted video. We all knew that, right? And we have video now, so we're happy. But I think we're just going to see new apps, new ways of doing things. I do believe augmented reality is going to be a big thing. I think that's something we are just now starting to realize as well.
Well, excellent, excellent. And, so just to bring that all back together, kind of quickly, Hitesh, maybe help me ask this question, solid, from a equipment perspective, an OEM perspective, you have, in addition to the carriers, in addition to, how the carriers need to manage this and deploy it, as an OEM, you're kind of doing the same juggling act. What does that look like for solid? I mean, C-band, millimeter wave, the legacy bands going to NR radio to meet 5G spec. Want to walk us through that real quick, kind of your push forward as an OEM?
Yeah. Well, back to my original statement about physics. The physics don't change. You still need cables. You guys, we used to say this. You need cables to make wireless. Excuse me. You need cables to make wireless work. And so, at Solid, we're constantly trying to stay ahead of when these new frequency bands and how they get deployed, and the complexities of offering the spectrum and offering these services. We're obviously working to keep up. It's hard for everyone, actually. For example, just being able to offer, full 200 megahertz of spectrum at 2.5 TDD, or the full 150 megahertz of spectrum in CBRS. And then you start adding these all together and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all the spectrum you have to try to run across one cable in one system. It's staggering the amount of capacity we shove through a cable nowadays, guys, compared to what we did back in 2005. It's crazy, right? So what we're having to do is figure out, how do we upgrade systems now, which, as you guys know, we're modular. So we're trying to leverage that modularity everywhere we can. In some cases, it will be layers. Millimeter wave will typically be a layer, as you know, especially from a repeater standpoint, or even potentially O-RAN standpoint. It will be a fiber layer. But ultimately, what we're focusing a lot on is, you may have seen us out there talking about fiber to the antenna, or fiber to antenna, as I've typically been calling it. And that's basically active devices in the ceiling that can do broad amounts of spectrum very easily, very cost effectively, and are much easier to upgrade as the frequency bands are changing, rather than having to rip and replace a lot of coax cables and stuff like that. We believe fiber is king in that department. And most importantly, all the solutions have to have a path towards this broad spectrum of bandwidth.
So my co-host here, Mr. Hitesh Kshatriya, is very familiar with fiber to the edge, both from a design perspective and from a deployment perspective. So Hitesh, would welcome your thoughts, feedback.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, you and I were sitting at a table a couple of years ago talking about fiber to the edge and what that could mean, and the concept of the digital ceiling or digital architecture out to the edge. So taking that into account on the design side has really been beneficial, and we've driven that into the enterprise space at time, and it's becoming more and more cost effective for sure as we're moving forward with that type of architecture, as more OEMs are coming out with different features and benefits around fiber to the edge. The solid fiber to the edge product, I believe, is it incorporates all the key bands sub 2.7, correct, right now, or is that?
Well, our roadmap goes all the way through C-band. We have all CBRS, all C-band, all full band 2.5. Everything has now been mapped out and has been scheduled out starting this year even. And so basically new flavors. right? New flavors of combinations to be able to include all those things. So when a carrier adds their solutions to the mix, you're adding a MIMO antenna and you're offering, full 250 megahertz, right? So things like that. So from where we started to where it's growing, it's really expanding upon that fiber antenna network, right?
Right, which is great. So you're able to take essentially the infrastructure that you had in place, and you're able to add to it and add these different layers, whether it's C-band, CBRS, the phase 2 of C-band that's auctioned later this year.
Yes.
It could be the millimeter wave. It could be anything at that point because you do have that fiber infrastructure to the edge. So I think that's a really strong play. And but kind of going back to Dennis's question, maybe not quite the end user, but the enterprise customer that you're installing the system into, right? How do they feel about that? How do they feel about fiber in their ceilings and all these devices throughout and everything else?
So the enterprise is looking for a connection, getting the carriers connected quickly, not 6 months, not 1 year, quickly, right? And they're looking for infrastructure that they can grow and scale with and not have to rip and replace again, right? So the fiber to the antenna does that, but it doesn't solve necessarily the signal source, right? So right now, the best source for signals are what the carriers are currently offering are small cells and other BTSs that they can provide, right? So that's now it doesn't necessarily solve speed, maybe some of the cost, but that is a big portion of what drives our business is how fast can you connect that system, right? And that's what drives the enterprise. And like I said, total cost of ownership. If the customer wants to add CBRS or they talk to carrier and just saying, hey, we want to do millimeter wave, they should be able to utilize that fiber. It may not even be a repeater, a millimeter wave. It may be a small cell or Samsung small cell, what have you, right? It could be any one of the toolkits, approaches, but Solid believes it's going to be fiber based. Years ago, we thought maybe that the cat cable would, be the medium of choice. But when you look at how much spectrum we got to shove across these cables, the cat cable just feels antiquated very quickly.
Well, let's kind of bring this all together here for just a second. So, and maybe add some new perspective to this. So you talked about fiber to the edge. You talked about new flavor. You talked about the enterprise. You talked about all these different pieces. So Ken, middle prize, first of all, shout out to Mike Colliato and Scott Gregory for adding a new word to the Webster Dictionary.
Middle prize.
Middle prize.
Yeah.
Definitely give them props for a creative word that has taken the market on. I mean, that originated, Ken and Hitesh, keep me honest here. Mike Colliato and Scott Gregory at the time kind of made up that word and really pushed it into the market. And from what I can see, it took hold. So, props to them. But, so what's the deal with middle prize today?
If Scott and Mike were on this show today, they would say, yeah, and it's still not solved.
Well, there you go. That's the question, right? So you talked about all these different fiber to the edge and this, what's the deal with the middle prize today? Where's it going? I mean, are we getting closer?
Yeah, I absolutely see a path towards that happening. And the two things that give me optimism, guys, are and there's really two. One is that, not just to say it quickly, but the O-RAN standard for standardized radio interface capabilities and basically white box radios for the carriers deploy. I don't think you guys realize just how big of a potential that is for in-building because, excuse me, because now it basically allows you to develop a product that meets the standard, gets tested by a carrier, and now the carrier can connect to it via split radio solution, O-RAN, and allows them to provision that service quickly and turn it on without literally deploying no equipment. They just supply pipe and connection. The equipment, essentially the head end becomes completely integrated. You can single pizza box the whole thing and then feed it a DAS system with it, right? And I'm talking, integrate that, right? So it allows us to create what we've never been able to create on the front end. It lowers the cost, and solves the speed problem. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that needs to, I think, not necessarily change, but we can't continue to do 9 bands of service in a Homewood Suites. We just need to pick like 4 bands, guys. These 4 bands keeps everyone's service optimal, and we can do everything with that. Maybe one of them is CBRS on every system, right? CBRS plus 3 bands, something like that, as the standard group of bands that are done in building. And that gives pretty much every carrier everything they wanted. And if they just choose to provide a connection, they can do so, and it's economical. And because that's really what's going to help drive the middle price, right? The stadiums and the big convention centers and all those beautiful projects that we do all the time, those things are going to do every single band known to man. And the reason is they have to. The capacity is so high. And that's fine. They can afford those things. But on a middle price, we can't afford to do that. And nor should the enterprise have to pay for all those bands and crap. Why? There's no need for it. When you have 200 megahertz of spectrum on this band and that band, another 100, what do you need that for? I mean, you got systems out there deploying in that there right now with 75 megahertz voice only, and people seem to be happy with it. So there's no reason for that much spectrum requirements. So and the band requirements. So I think that's going to be the biggest shift that's going to enable middle price, and it will all make us pretty happy. I'm not suggesting we have to strip it down so that the functionality doesn't work. I think the 5G experience needs to be intact. It can't be just voice and text only. I mean, come on, we don't live in that kind of age, right? We want our 5G, and we want it inside,
There you go. Well, in speaking of capacity, in the interest of Marvin's side-by-side dual cassette Casio recorder that we're producing this show on is smoking right now from all the capacity we fed it today with this conversation. I think, Ken, we're going to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit, wrap up from a solid perspective, kind of put that all together. Tell us, your closing statement on how Solid's going to do all this, and then we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. So, we are going to continue leveraging a proven platform and adding capabilities and advancements to it, right? That being obviously all the additional band capacity that people are looking for. We're adding new architectures for cloud management that allow you to manage and monitor 10,000s of the elements out in the marketplace, and let's say a macro network. So we're working very hard to be able to deploy more nodes, more elements. And we're working hard to also kind of solve both ends of the spectrum. We talked about venues and we talked about middle price. We're really looking hard at solving both, because just solving for the big venues, that's great for, the revenue, but it really leaves all these projects undone. And I see the carriers most interested in solving for the middle price, because they're going to do the stadiums. They're going to do all those things anyways, right? That's like not even a question, but they've had trouble solving for down below. So we're spending a lot of effort on that part of it, and making it easier, making it faster, and lowering the total cost to ownership to be able to do that quickly, right? So, and solving for the 5G experience, we're working really hard on the millimeter wave solutions, which have beamforming and all these cool technologies in it. And actually, if you recall, a while ago we launched a brand called Surf. Our plan is to bring millimeter wave to that Surf O-RAN architecture as well. And, you're going to see O-RAN being a big push. You're going to see millimeter wave being a big push. And you're going to see us looking to obviously solve for all this big spectrum that the carriers want to deploy. And that's what we're doing essentially. Those are the big focuses for us, and making sure that people know how to do it,
Well, excellent.
That's exciting, Ken. There's a lot there. There's a lot to manage and handle from what the operators have, all the capacity that you mentioned, all the spectrum that they have, along with the technology hurdles to deploy something in a stadium or in a small apartment building, right? I mean, there's a huge difference there, and being able to deploy all of that under a single product line or under a single OEM. I mean, that's a huge obstacle to overcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
it is.
Okay. So Ken, we really appreciate your perspective, your insight, everything you shared with us today has been terrific. Thanks for taking the time. Real quick before we let you go, as part of this podcast, I don't know if you caught it. Looking for a little. We're like NASCAR here, right? Sponsorship opportunities. Hitesh.
I got my Yeti mug here with the solid logo on it.
There you go. So we're,
There you go.
so these opportunities are available. Selfish plug here to for sponsors going forward. So why a podcast? Why this podcast? Hopefully, we're going to bring a few friends together, like Ken. Hitesh and I've known him for a long time. Have a few laughs, share some thoughts, reminisce a little bit. We'd like it to be relaxed, open, informative. Most important, fun. And today's been fun for me, Hitesh, hopefully for you, and Ken, hopefully for you. And, we look forward to hopefully Ken at some point doing this again. I think Deweese texted me 2 or 3 times since we've been on this, asking when it's his turn. So we'll try to get him on here pretty soon. And but also, going forward, we are going to be bringing other guests on, talking about marketing during a pandemic. We'll be talking about commercial real estate. We'll be talking about smart cities and all these different things. So as we move forward, distribution will be part. So, looking forward to continuing to advance the conversation and, continue to share great guest stories like we had today. Once again, you can find us on LinkedIn or on YouTube at Dishin with DR. You can email us at podcast at dishinwithdr.com. Look forward to, you can ask us about becoming a guest, potential sponsor, or just share some ideas and thoughts, feedback. It's always much appreciated. So any closing comments, Hitesh?
All good. Looking forward to the next one. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining today. And Ken, I appreciate your time too. This was great.
Episode number 1. It was truly a privilege and honor. I really appreciate you considering me for the first one like this. This was so cool. And, I couldn't be happier to spend some time with you guys. Thank you so much.
Excellent. We'll do this again in person soon, Ken. Thanks for everything.
Look forward to it, guys. Thank you.
All right. So this episode 1, was brought to you once again by RK Squared. RK Squared is flexible, transparent, on time, and under budget. It's a fresh new look at in-building wireless. RK Squared is designed to redefine.